All right, so we've got Chris's Cortina up here. Rear end is out of it, so diff's out of it, fuel tank's out of it. We've got some funny things to show you with the fuel tank, which are not funny, but it is what it is. Lucky that we pulled it out. Now we're going to address the rear end. So we've got some doubler plates that we're putting on the control arms here for the uppers, so we not strengthen them there, and then we're also going to drill through the floor and make sure that it's the appropriate strength to not rip these bad boys out. And then from there, we have a little issue with the top of the diff with the new brackets on it hitting the old suspension bar along with the floor. So we're going to go ahead and cut this section out. So that's going to come out, and then allow the diff to go up to get the height and the ride height that we want, as well as the exertion from the shocks to work. So there's an abundance of things that are stopping this car from doing what it needed to do. So now we can address them one by one. But the diff's coming together. The diff is on the back bench over here. So she's looking the goods. So we got the new lower brackets, shock brackets, stiffener bars for the shocks and for the lower arms, along with the new top arms there too. So obviously the diff's upside down. And if you've watched any of our other videos, you know that at this point here we put on all the diffs so you can jack it up without ruining your powder coat and everything else. But this is looking the goods. Now it's to the point where we can tack these stiffener bars in, put our diff jig in it, or put it on the diff jig, and then we can go ahead and weld it up. So it's coming together, but we're going to get those doubler plates in that Lockie's finished up. So, and here we have the new suspension bar getting ready to go in there. So we'll have these doubler plates popped in here just to give that little thin part of the rail a bit of added strength, and yeah, it gives us an area where we can run our anti-roll bar. So we have one of Darren from Mood Motorsports anti-roll bars going in this. So we'll be running that on the back side of the diff and then down. So we're going to jump into it, get these doubler plates in, straighten up a couple other bits and pieces, get the floor cut out, and then we can start mocking up the diff and figuring out ride height. And one thing that I probably left out was we're doing control arms. So we've got to do different control arms. Because the brackets are bigger and further away, the top arms aren't going to work. Due to the size that they are as well, we're not going to use them. And we've got to modify his bottom arms to be a little bit shorter because we've got a lower bracket and bringing it closer to the car. They just need to be a touch shorter so we can get the adjustment we need before we jump on the front end. So let's go check out the fuel tank. Beautiful. So here we have the fuel tank out of the Cortina. So that is where this lovely work of art came out of. So instead of chasing all of these little repairs and leaks and unknown fixings, we cut it out, and we're very glad we did, because this car is going to have, so being carby car doesn't need too much fuel up the front and all that stuff. The bowls are usually ample enough to do a quarter-mile pass or a street drive or anything like that. But with nitrous, you really want that fuel pressure to the front and having a little bit of auxiliary fuel as well. When we've cut this out, we've found that was the design on the sump, so that's not going to work, so that's no good. That's in there, how it was jammed, so yeah, that's no good. It's not what you want. So I'm glad we cut this out. I think it was a good decision. There's some very creative stuff happening there, but it's not the right stuff. So that is not enough fuel to do what it needs to do. And if anyone wants to argue that, find someone else to argue it with. But we're gonna be replacing that with a different style fuel tank. So down here we've got the new sump. So we're going to be utilising the fuel lines that are already on the car. So we're going to be putting a new sump in it, which is this little fella here. And then we'll be able to put our little strip in there to fill that up. But that's going to be the sump. So we're going to turn this upside down. So pretend this is the bottom of the fuel tank. So that's going to be the sump, and we're going to have the fittings coming out of that. That's our little extension plate that goes at the back there. But here we've got a little swirl pot. This swirl pot has a little divider in it that's not quite sitting on the bottom. sitting on the bottom there. So it's all welded up, and we haven't drilled our little drain accepting holes just yet. And on this face is where our fittings are going to come in. So we're going to have a drain fitting, and we're also going to have a supply fitting. So that supply fitting is going to utilize all the fuel that's on this side of the swirl pot. Sorry about the shininess. It might be. The supply is going to be coming from that side, but then we're going to use the fittings that are on top of the tank, and like I said, we're utilizing the fuel lines that are already there, and then we're going to bend up a fuel return line that's going to come over, and it's going to supply this side. So the reason why we put the baffle in there is to stop aeration. So the fuel that's coming back in here doesn't make any air or anything for the supply line, and it doesn't have any feeding issues. So that's a little design we're using for this application, being carby and nitrous. So that's that. And then the next step would be to clean up a couple of bits and pieces in here. So some of those things that are in here that we need to look at is the supply to fill up the fuel tank actually has half of it blocked off down there. See if I can put this in there. So the owners had some issues filling it up before with it popping back out the fuel cap and a couple other bits and pieces. So it can be very frustrating. So we're going to alleviate that issue by cutting that out. We'll put another strip in there so the fuel comes in free flowing and fills the tank up, no worries. As far as the rest of the fuel tank, it's not a massive fuel tank. So there's no need for extra baffling or anything like that. We can do some drive plates that bring the fuel closer to the swirl pot, but the swirl pot's ample enough. It's definitely going to have enough fuel at all times, so we don't have to really address that too much, especially with the return that's going to be filling it up at all times as well. So that's the fuel tank. So along with a couple other things like welding the underneath of the strip that goes around it, giving it a bit of a clean up from the old school look, that can go back in place. So we're going to jump into that. We'll get that all finished, get that diff sorted, and get it in the car.
The next day.
So we are back on Chris's Cortina. We've got the laser set up under here, as you can probably see, just there. So along with a bunch of squiggly lines under here. So the idea for this is these lines here, the tin work that we're going to be taking out. Got a little texture line on that as well, which is just the rough line to show where our bar is going to come up from here, across, and then back down. So then the diff has some room to go up there. And then we've got our plates on either side where our bar is going to sit roughly like that. So we're going to be able to get all that room in there and still have the suspension points where they originally were. So we've got all that sorted. We've got our double plate sorted, so we can strengthen those top arm supports and whatnot. So from here we will start cutting out the floor and then start mocking up, making the double plates that go on for the purchase areas of that bar, suspension bar, and then we'll go ahead cutting it, get it all out, clean it all up. Once that bar's in, that is going to be the bar that we're going to be joining from front to back where the parachute mount is, to make like a little bit of a support for the fuel tank as well. So if anything were to happen for the rear end of the car, that it'd have a lot of support go onto the chromoly bars. From there, we'll get it all cut out. We'll show you what it looks like when it's all cut out, and we'll get that bar in. As Chris's car came in running and driving, and we're about to cut all this sheet metal out, we are going to pull out the bulkheads that go to the fuel return and the breather, along with, you'll see some wires up here. So we've got the battery wire cable running through, and we've got some wires for, I don't know, speakers or something else, as well as a nitrous line. So what we're going to do is just grab this bit of aluminium scrap. We're going to place it underneath those wires, just like so. And that way it alleviates the issue that we're going to have. The issue we're going to have of cutting through the wires. And we've got a high bay that just decided to die. High bays, silly things. Anyways, let's get cutting. Alright, so we've got everything cut under here. So we've got obviously a big hole here, and we've got some cardboard template up there. It's also going to stop a bunch of sparks and stuff going on. But you'll see the holes that we've drilled right along this edge. Now you've got the floor pan that comes up, then you've got the back seat that goes that way, and then it's got a whole bunch of spot welds that go right along that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to dolly that up and we're going to plug weld to the back. That way it's got a bit of a lap weld, so the back seat goes like that, then we'll have a cupped piece there, so it's nice and strong. We're never going to have an issue there, and we never have any bit of a landing for dirt and grime to sit up there. So once we put our covering up there, we're actually going to put two little plates that go up here, which is going to stop all the dirt and everything from sitting up on top of the rails, and things for rust, moisture and all that stuff. We want to alleviate that being an issue. So we're going to dolly this up, get it ready to be plug welded and dressed back up, and then we're going to try and get this suspension bar in place with our double of plates either side, and we should be apples. So we'll jump into that. Alright, so the floor's all cut out and we've tacked our bar in place just to check a few things. So we've got the chromoly bar up in here, now it's bent, picking up the old suspension points. Our double of plates will go in here, but we just need to make sure it's in the right place at the right height, so the diff can go up and make sure those upper control arm brackets fit in. So next step is to grab the diff, we'll put it on the trans jack. We'll put the center line in here, make sure we're happy where the wheels positioning and everything's going to be, where the axle is, and then we'll be able to hopefully go, yep, that's all good, and then make everything permanent. So we'll do those plug welds across the back tin work there, and then we'll be able to get these doubler plates in for the sides. I'll show you how they fit in. So our doubler plate is going to sit in there just like that. So we'll be able to plug weld everything in, weld around it, and that should be all happy days. So that's going to be that just for now. Alright, so we're back on the Cortina. We've got the suspension bar in, a bunch of the doubler brackets all ready to go, and all the areas cleaned up on the chassis rails. And we got the rear end in with the control arms and everything in. We'll show you them in just a minute. So they're all welded. We found all the lengths, got all that in, but we were continuing to chase 5mm discrepancy from side to side, and we couldn't figure it out. And then yeah, we were coming down on the arms, and we figured out over here our control arm bracket has actually completely separated off the floor. So see how that moves? That, no bueno. We're going to bang some doubler plates on the other side, and then we're going to be able to fill up these holes, and then that'll have a little bit extra strength on top, including the ones we've put on the side to stop the movement side to side. So we're going to get that all done. We're going to do a couple of repairs, maybe where some old brackets and stuff were. So we'll weld up these holes along with a couple other bits and pieces. And then this area up here where we've dollied everything back, we're going to dolly it even more because it's only gently pushed back. We're going to plug weld all them, dress that area back up before we go ahead and start putting all the doubler brackets in for the suspension bar and everything like that. So that's that done. The fuel tank is done, so let's head over to the fuel tank. Alright, fuel tank's all done. So we've got the new sump on it, again with the swirl pod inside, and we've got the return line heading over to the swirl pod as well. So that's all in, it's all welded up, and we've given it a little bit of an orbital. We're going to give it a nice finish a little bit later on, but gone are the days of having a polished fuel tank every time you spill a little bit of fuel or whatever that may be. But we've done that, and we have also redone the fittings and everything on top as well. So unfortunately these sand marks were previously done and whatnot, but we've filled up everything and give it a bit of a clean back, ready to go. So that's the fuel tank done. Let's check out these control arms. Alright, so we've got all the diff done, so all the bracketry's on, we've got the bracing on, we've got the back pieces we just need to clean up to brace our upper and lower control arms. And then we have the control arms all done. So all the rod ends are all welded, they're all done. So we've got our plug welds as well, all in them. So you can jump back to one of our previous videos and you'll see how we put all them back together. So now the next step is just to clean it up. There's a little bit of surface rust that's happened overnight, especially with weather and everything that's coming in, and putting your greasy hands and everything on it. So we're going to clean it back up, and then we're going to make sure that everything's all good. So we're going to pop the axles in, put the wheels on, absolutely triple check, make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, and then we'll be able to final weld it. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to do all the repairs underneath the car. We're gonna strengthen everything we need to, and then we're gonna go ahead and pop everything and assemble things again. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's one of those things you need to do to make sure things are mwah. So let's get to preparing. Beautiful. All right, Lockie's just going up on the hoist on the Cortina at the moment. We have our tin work all etch primed up here, so we've tried to keep the factory swages in the back firewall following that, so it looks really good. And we've got a doubler piece here that we're going to be putting in very shortly. So this is going to go on the back side where you can see the cutouts are down there. Goes behind, so then you don't have a seam where they're welded, and we've got a doubler for torsion of the car and everything like that. But as I said, suspension bar is all tacked in up in here, so we've got that all sorted here, and we've got our doubler plates all welded in place here, and we also have our little side panel infills up here. These side panel infills are so no dirt goes up and sits on top of our rail. We don't want that. Obviously rust, everything that can happen, and it's not a place to really be able to get into when the control arms and everything are in there. So we put those brackets either side, or plates either side, to avoid everything going up onto the rail, because it's a no-go zone. You're never going to be able to see it. Do you want to come down, Lockie, and we'll show the plates on the inside? Alright, so we're just inside where you'll be able to, if you come over and check it out, you'll see the side plates are in here. So before we go putting our cover across the top here, we've got to move our wires, get in behind it, make sure it's all seam sealed and everything like that. So we'll continue to put a couple of stitches here along the top here and make that all in place. But they are pretty sturdy already with only just 3 tacks in them. So we're going to bring all the wiring through. Which is going to go up around the back to the tail lights on this side, and then on that side it's going to go to the boot release and everything on that side. So we've got wires either side that are going to come through the grommets, but we want to get them out the way just for now so we can get in behind it after we put a couple more stitches on it, and then we can go ahead and seam seal that section, and we know that's all good. Then I can jump on to welding this suspension bar in completely. So we're going to jump onto that. We're going to stitch them in, put the seam sealer in, and then we might quickly show you how we put our tin work in on the top there to go over the shock and upper control arm brackets. So we're going to jump straight back into it. We'll see in just a sec. Alright, so we've got Tane here fixing up the old, maybe accidentally cut some wires. We're just welded the suspension bar in, so that's all in there, welded in. So now the next step is to tack these plates in, get them stitched in, and then put our seam sealer around them so we know there's no dust going to go in there. And then after that is done on the inside, not this side, not underneath, just on the inside cavity in there, then we can bang the tin work in, pull the wires through, and then have everything all hunky-dory, ready to be welded in. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to get this tin work in. So Lockie has jumped onto the tin work. We've just dressed back all the plug welds on this side, and we have on the back side, you will see the little angle that we were talking about earlier. That is ready to be welded to the floor. So we're just going to etch prime all those. I'll give that to you. Etch prime all of our tacks, and then we can jump back into getting this thing ready to put the tin work in. Beautiful. So the bar's all welded in. We have the tin work in. We've stitched everything in, and now we are ready to. We've already just mocked up the rear end. We've put the diff assembly in, arms, got the axles in, put the tyres in, made sure everything's all good with clearances and whatnot. We've touched up everything that we need with etch primer. We've cleaned up a couple of the old bits and pieces that was done previously. Now we're going to jump onto the seam sealer. So the seam sealer is used predominantly for stopping all the elements getting in between the metals. So right across this line here, we're going to put the seam sealer, so then that way no water or dirt or grime sits there and gets between the two panels and then rusts and everything else that can come over time. And then also we don't want any of that getting into the boot either. We want to keep it nice and clean. So where we've got all these corner materials and everything like that, if this goes to the track and does a burnout and starts flicking up all the elements off the ground and smoke getting into the cabin and all that stuff, we're trying to alleviate any of that happening. So we're going to go along and we finish up with seam sealer. This is not something that you use to bond two materials. Yeah, that's not my thing. I don't do bodywork. I don't do any of that stuff. We do fabrication. So this is just purely and utterly to seal any gaps that may be there. So where the two materials are across here and it's got plug welds the whole way along it, or factory spot welds and whatnot, we haven't put the glue in there prior to the spot weld. So what we do is just put that along it just to seal it up so we know that no elements can get in between them. So we're going to jump into that now. Beautiful. All right, so we've got our doubler plates either side to strengthen up that rail section that we have. So they're all welded in and dressed back flat. And now we have just started doing our plates that are going to be the dropper plates that come off the side. Next will be putting them in place. We've got our line where we want the center of the droppers to go. So that line there is going to dictate where they're going to sit, and then the bar is going to go across. What we do is we get those doublers on, we put a gusset off the bottom side of the rail when it's a dropper, and we make sure, obviously, that they're perpendicular with the back of the car. We bolt our bearing ends on, and then we'll put our plug ends in either side. We'll measure between it, make sure we're happy with that with just a little bit of movement, and then we'll be able to put our arms onto our diff, and then we got our bracketry that comes with the anti-roll bar kits to go on the diff. So in this case, they work perfectly fine. So we'll be able to do that. Once we get that in, I'll be able to show you why and where we position the arms for the anti-roll bar. So we'll finish welding these up, we'll get them in the car, and then we'll jump onto that bit. All right, everything's assembled. We have anti-roll bar in, we have our mounts done. We just need to weld our gussets. We just needed to make sure everything was right. Our arms are all mocked up, shocks are mocked up. This is hanging down all the way. So when we jack her up, there we go. All right, so when it's at its highest point, the anti-roll bar doesn't foul on anything. It's in a position where it's all gonna work. All the arms and everything have clearance, so we know where the absolute lowest we can go is, because the next lowest point we have is these arms. So these arms just here, we come very, very close to the body, but we still have our gap and everything's in place. So geometry looks good for a mock-up, and then obviously we're going to have our fuel tank that drops in here, and then we're going to be jumping onto the back now, which we're going to be putting a parachute bar. So there's a little notch in this section, and the number plate is right behind there. So if we can get the bar to come across, maybe cut some of this material out, run it behind there, then back up, then we'll be able to put some bars for stability coming across there. On this side, we do need to be careful because our fuel pump and everything sits under here. We are going to have to reroute some lines and everything through here, but that's not the end of the world. We know we can get them through. We've still got heaps of room around all these arms and everything, so we will be just fine. But it's looking good. Everything looks really good. Anti-roll bar's looking spot on. So now the process is of pulling everything out. We're going to pull everything out, and then we're going to clean everything up, take the mill scale off in the areas we need to. We'll put the diff jig together, start the welding process, and then get it all together. So while we're doing that, then we can get the boys jumping on to getting that bar across the backside of the diff, and then we know that we can put our stabilizer bars, and then we can have our little chute popping out just there. So we're going to jump into it. Let's go. All right, quick little update. Got the fuel cell in at the moment. We needed to mock some things up. Anti-roll bars just sitting in position at the moment because we've had to put the fuel system in, or fuel pump in. So we've mocked up all of the lines in the fuel tank and everything like that. So we've got the breather, the return off the fuel pump, as well as the pickup as well. So the pickup's underneath. So we realised that the supply line was actually failing on the anti-roll bar. So we've put some new mounts in here, some rubber engine mounts. So they'll be able to absorb a lot of the sound, a lot of the vibration as well, which are absolute blessing with some of these big pumps. And the parachute bar is all mocked up. So we've got that going in, goes across, and we've got our doubler plates in position. There. These ones are all welded. Those ones need to be welded. And then we've got our stabilizer bar as well. But we've actually cut that in to the back of the car here because we're very limited on room where the fuel tank goes. So we've got that. Then our fuel lines come out across from here. And it's going to go up and then into the fuel line there and then straight up. So we've got a fuel filter going in here. So we are getting there slowly but surely, but you've got to do these mock-up stages. It is annoying putting things in and out, but at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you are remembering everything as well. So diff is all welded. We've got that up here. So everything's all welded up. And we got our tag on the back. So yeah, all that needs to be done is weld the ends. I don't like welding the ends until it's all completely cool, and then we'll clean up these little bits where it spins on our jack stands and whatnot as well. So we'll get this in after we make the brake line. So what I like to do is while it's up on the table, we'll run a brake line the whole way across, and then we won't terminate the end either. We'll just leave it a little bit long, so then when we put the brake drums on, we know where they're going. So we're going to pull it. It's going to go across here, up and over the bracket, up to our little T section. So we'll have the brake hose going in, and then it'll have either side. It'll have a brake line going to the left and the right. So that'll be done. So we don't have to do it in the car. We already know where the brake line is in the car, where it comes through the floor. So we are all sorted. Now, I suppose we'll come down, we'll show you the boot and what's going on in there. All right, now the boot. So, like I said, fuel cell's in. We had to do some wiring. We've got a 6-pin Deutsch plug there now. It was in a continuous loop the whole way around the back of the car. So when we've done the tin work in here, you'll see the grommets where the nitrous line and the fuel system comes through, wiring comes through, where that comes through, it was in a big continuous loop, so we had to cut it, pull it back out, pull it into the cab, finish the tin work, which is this piece here that we've just done. Super wrapped how that came out. It follows all the factory swage lines in the back there. It's just it's come out really, really neat. So that's that. Now we're going to replace some of these lines because they just don't fit exactly how we want them. So we're going to do that along with a couple other fittings that we need to change as well. So we're now at the stage where we're going to pull the tank out, finalize the parachute where it'll come out just behind the number plate there, and then we can dictate exactly what we're going to jump onto next, whether it's putting the diff in or finalizing some brackets and stuff on the car. So we'll jump into that and we'll show you along the way what we're doing and how we're doing it. She's looking a little bit more bare in here, but you can probably see the hole we've banged in the back with the parachute mount. So now we pop our head in here, be very careful. Yeah, it's no fuel tank, no fuel pump or anything like that. Now we've just cut all the tacks that were tacking the parachute bar in place, and then I can remove it, pull it out, and I'll be able to weld it. So in 2 secs I can do that. Alright, so that's our parachute mount. So we've got, this will all be getting cut off. So what I like to do is actually put the insert in. So this is where the parachute mount will go to. Now this here I like to cut at the same time, so they both get the nice same end on them, same finish, and then we'll drill through there, and then obviously we'll cut this down, put our anchor point for the parachute, and then our bag holder on the top. So we've got our 2 stays that go to the inside of the rail, and then we have 2 stays that go to the underneath of the rail. So this will obviously sit in the car that way, and the chute mount comes out just like that. And it's nice and light being chromoly, so we're not adding too much weight. So now we'll be able to final weld all these pieces that I wouldn't be able to get to in the car, pop it back in, final weld it in, and then we've got a parachute mount. And just like that, we've got a parachute. Parachute mounts in. And under here we have it all welded in place. So you can see there. We've edge primed the back side of the parachute bar that's on this face. That's so you can see the black. So that way we know it's not going to rust or anything behind there, and it can stay out of the elements. So there is a couple of things we do need to do. One of those things is we are going to seam seal just around that edge there. Just so the elements can stay out of it. So if anything goes through a car wash or anything like that, doubt it, but you can make sure that all the elements don't get in behind that and rust it out or do whatever it needs to do. But we've stitched it to the back beaver panel, so there's not going to be any sounds or any noises or anything coming from the back of the car, so that's awesome. Now we're going to edge prime everything, seam seal it up, and then in the morning we can jump on to start fitting the rest in. Alright, so that's the fab done on the Cortina. So stoked with how it's looking. We've got the 4-link bars done, diff's done, anti-roll bar is in. We have all the chromoly bracing that we put across the back for the clearance on the diff to go up. We've got our parachute bar in the back here. So we still need a seam seal around that, but we want to do that last minute because we want to make sure that the fuel tank and everything is going to be in position. So super stoked how this has come up with not having to change the fuel tank position because that would have been annoying. But anti-roll bar is looking the goods. We still need to put the spring on the shock. We've allowed clearances for everything, so it's definitely looking the piece. So we'll come down. Actually, that's one thing we left we need to do. We need to put the diff breather in the diff up there. So we'll drill the top of the diff, tap that in, get that done. But we are going to pull all of the rear end out now. We're going to put it down here and get it all ready to go and get some paint on it. So we're going to get some paint on it. We're going to edge prime everything a couple of coats until Chris decides exactly how he wants to go about it. But if we get it in edge primer, then we can assemble the diff and get it back on the ground and Chris can start driving. We do have a couple of bits and pieces left. We have a fuel system. With the fuel system, we've put new rubber mounts at the top here. Those rubber mounts in there. So they're like a little engine mount. The shaft doesn't go all the way through the rubber. It's insulated, so it comes in one side, and then the rubber insulates at both sides. So that won't have any solid vibration noises or anything like that. And now we'll have to run the fuel system. So our supply line is gonna go from the fuel tank through to a filter just here. From that filter, it will go into the pump. So we're gonna step it up behind the parachute bar into here. Now, because we have the anti-roll bar, the parachute bar, and a bunch of other different things in the car that wasn't in there earlier, we're gonna have to route things a bit differently. So we're gonna have a line go up, around, and then meet here. We're gonna use the factory lines, or with the lines that were already on the car. We're gonna be running them to a bulkhead around about here, and then we'll meet our new lines up to there. So that way we don't have to run new lines all the way to the front. There's no need if we don't have to. And then the other thing that we need to do prior to this leaving is get the new mufflers on. So we're gonna out with the old one. We're gonna be banging some new center offset mufflers on it. And yeah, so pull the rear end out. We're gonna paint that and we're gonna get everything ready to reassemble, put the fluids in and get it all done. On the back here you can see we've got the chute. The chute's all done. Chute mount is all done. So that's all in place. Now we can focus on pulling everything out, and then when we get down and everything's out, I'll be able to show you what we've done in the boot. Just a quick recap on the boot. So everything's in position, just to quickly mock up exactly where everything's going, and we're going to be remaking some new fuel lines along with a couple other bits and pieces as well. So let's do a recap. We've modified the floor, so we've had to modify the tin work. So that included the hump at the back here, which we've married up the original swages, which I'm pretty happy how they've come up. Super stoked how those swages have come up. So nitrous bottles in. We've relocated the battery from the flat floor up there down to over on the passenger side at the rear here behind the nitrous bottle. The blanket's done. We had to do a Deutsch plug at the back just to make sure all the wiring and everything was sorted. Now let's go over the fuel lines. Let's talk fuel lines. So we have a couple in here. So this one here, we have our breather. So that's got a couple of loops in them as per rules and regulations for what he wants to use the car for. So we've got to have the loop in it. And then over here, we have our return line from our reg out the front of the car. So this is off the supply, runs to the regulator. The regulator goes to the carburetor, and then also off the return from that back to here. And that's where that gets fed. That's where we put our return into our swirl pod at the back that's baffled, so it stops aeration and everything like that. And then this little line over here that you'll see there, this little line here is the return off the fuel pump. So instead of the fuel pump sending everything it's got down to the reg, this returns and breathes into the backside of the tank over here. So that is a little blessing that some of these fuel pumps can do. And down here, we're going to replace this fuel breather hose, because at one point or another this would have been lower, but now at the height that this runs at, we're going to have to raise it up so it's breathing above the tank, so that way you don't get the click, 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 click every time you fill it up. So that is all good. We know our sender wires go back to the same spot because we haven't moved them. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to get these parts into paint. First, we're going to measure our control arms from eye to eye to make sure that they go back in the right place, because we've done a very general mock-up. We want to get it in the ballpark as soon as we can. And then we're going to jump onto the fuel system. So with the fuel system side of things, we're going to bolt the fuel tank down in position, and then we know that's not going to move. Now, when that's bolted in position, the fuel pump isn't going to move either, because it's very short fitting here with a tiny bit of hose in it. So we know that wherever it's going to sit underneath the car, with or without the anti-roll bar in there, we know that's going to dictate the height of where everything is. So we can do the back half of the fuel system while we're waiting for the paint to dry. And then we can do the hard lines and the bulkheads into the boot here. We can finish all of them up, because in here is not going to matter to anything that's underneath the car. So let's jump straight into getting everything ready for paint and then jumping into the fuel system. Let's go.
What are you doing here?
We're just measuring the center to center on the heim joints. So we've pulled the arms off. We've kept them in the order that they are. So we've got uppers and lowers, passenger and drivers. So what we're doing here is just a quick little measurement, a little bit of a cheat, is these heim joints pivot obviously in the rod end. So they'll move like that. So sometimes it's going to be hard while they're out of the car and they're not bolted through to measure your centers for your length of your arms. So a quick little cheat way to do it is we've got some heads on some bolts that are flat on this side. So most Imperial bolts are going to have the lines on them anyways, which are nice and flat. But we've got one cut down and one long one. So what I do is I pop that longer one through, and then I put this shorter one through, just like that. And we make sure they're nice and flat. So just loosen off those jam nuts, keep them nice and flat like so, and then we can measure from there to there, and we've got our measurement. So we push it up against this bolt, and then we hang the tape measure over this side, and that shows us our center to center, because we're going from one side of the bolt to the other side of the bolt. They're nice and flat. You can't change how they are. So now that it's sitting on the hex side of things, the bar's not going to be sitting exactly 100% flat on that, but the bolts are going to be nice and flat, sticking straight up. So we know our centers is exactly that. So bang that in there, that in there. That way, after paint, we can even out the arms, and we know exactly where they go. Happy days. So she's all painted, we've put everything back in. Now we are just going to measure, we've got our arm links and everything where we mocked everything up, but now we're going to square everything up, make sure we can get the wheels on, make sure everything's all happy days. Like I said, we did have a little measure, but now we're going to be putting it where it needs to be prior to going to the 4-post, so we know we're not having pinion angle ridiculous and making sure everything's all happy days. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to square up these bottom arms, make sure the top arms are exactly the same, whether they're out 5, 10 mil or whatever they may be, because the car has a discrepancy on the bolt placement from the chassis. So then we'll be able to get everything right, put the wheels on, get this thing on the ground, see what it looks like. And I think we're not going to make some changes to the front. So let's jump into this and see what we can get done. Chris's Cortina has finally made it to the 4-post, and as you probably can see behind me, we've got a bunch of hardline with all the equipment and all the fittings and everything we need to finish off the fuel system and do a brake line up and over the diff. But let's have a little look under the car and we'll see where we're at the moment. So we've had a quick little look under here. Everything's all set up very close to where we need it. All the geometry seems as correct as we can get it. Bear with me, it's freaking hot. We've come in on a Sunday to do this, just to pump some tunes and get it all done, but we've got the lines that were already on the car. We've just cut them off back here because now it won't go back the same way that it was. So we're gonna put a little bulkhead fitting just here, and then a little plate that's welded to the floor, and then we'll be able to bang 2 bulkheads there, and then we'll be able to make our new lines that come up here. So our fuel pumps up here with our little engine mounts we talked about just a bit earlier. So we're gonna have a line go around into this fella here, and that will be the supply line. The supply line is going to head up, round the coil over, and then come back down into this little bulkhead fitting. And then the other one's gonna go up, the other line's gonna follow it, and then it's gonna head to here, right where the return is, right in front of this anti-roll bar here. So we're gonna show you how we do that, how we get about it. And then we'll come down and we'll show you the lines we've already made in the boot, because then we're going to have to flare them. So we'll take you step by step from grabbing it out a spool of hardline, how we straighten it and how we get it all good, and then we'll show you how we measure it, bend it and get it all together. So let's jump into it. Alright, so we got our little bulkhead bracket that we're going to be banging on the floor. So you'll see it's 2 different sizes, because we've got a 1/2 inch and then we've got a 5/8 fuel line. So these little fellas have 3 different parts, or 4 different parts. You've got the plate, you've got the bulkhead fitting itself, which will go through, and then we've got a fibre washer, and then the nut, the locking nut. So that goes together just like that. So then we have our bulkhead. So these come in handy in a bunch of different ways, going through firewalls, rear parcel shelves, floors, like you name it, any part of the body that you need to go from one side to the other. Super, super handy. And we're actually using this to split up the rear section from the front section of the fuel lines. So on the car, we've got two lines running to the front that were already made. So we're just about to straighten them out, get them all mounted, and then we can figure out exactly where we're going to place this bulkhead bracket. So mind the camera angle, it was the only position I could pop her in. So we got that and whatnot. The orientation of the bulkheads can be both ways, but in this particular place we're going to pop it in the car, needs to be one way, because we've got hard lines running to the front. We won't be able to pull them back off of these fittings. So what step-by-step process is going to be, those lines are in the car, the bulkhead fitting is going to be put in place, and then we're actually going to screw the bulkhead fitting in, and then we're going to be nipping it up onto this plate and then doing up the little nut that'll end up being on there just like that. And then this style fitting actually has 3 parts as well. So you'll have the fuel line that comes in. It's got actually got one here that I can show you. So you got the fuel line itself. This is an old fuel line off the car, and you'll see we've got the little nut, securing nut there, and then we've got the collar, and then we've got the tube that gets flared on the end there. So you'll see it's got a little flare on the end, and that is where these things come into play. So this is our flaring tool. So we've got our tube cutter, our deburrer, so that'll do the outsides, that'll do the insides, and then we have our flaring tool itself. This one here, they come in all different sorts. Just look up flaring tool, I'm sure you'll be able to see all the different ways. And then we've got all of our different dies that go in there for our different fuel lines. So I'll just drop that. So ours goes all the way up to 5/8, 5/8, ½ inch, 3/8, 5/16, quarter, and then 3/16, all the way down to our brake line tube. So, which we are doing a bit of everything on this. So we'll pop this torch on, we'll walk under the car, and we'll see what we're up to. All right, so our little bulkhead's gonna sit just there. So we're a little texture mark around it where we're gonna clean it up, because we're gonna weld that to the floor. But you'll see these are the lines that were already there. We've just straightened them out, so they're a bit tidy, sitting across that rail there, all the way up. And now we've marked where we need to cut them. Got our bulkhead in position, so where that is, you can still get a socket and a spanner on that lower control arm nut, and they're starting to go up, so that way we don't have a sharp bend coming straight out of them. So from there, then we'll make the trek up and over the rail to our 2 fittings at the back there. So we'll get these lopped off, we'll clean up that little patch, tack it onto the floor, make sure it's just staying there tacked for now. Then we can get our line start cracking up and over the back. Beautiful. We are currently just got a bit of aluminium TIG rod, and we're just bending up the route we're going to do for the fuel lines. So we got quite a bit done last night. We had a bit of a late night on this trying to get it done, but we'll quickly give you a quick update what we're up to. So under the car we have the supply, so that's coming up into the fuel filter, and then we've got the line that goes to our fuel pump just up here. And that one's in place. Now we're going to do supply line along the side of the rail, because we know the lowest point of the diff and the rail never hit. So we'll be able to bring that up down the bottom side of that control arm mount, and then bang into our supply line, and then our return's going to come up and follow that one, and then from here it's going to go up across here and into our little return fitting we've got just there. So we just need to make sure it's not going to hit the control arm or any of our bar work and anything that's in there, and then we know it'll all be good when this anti-roll bar comes up. It's all going to be in its little home and it's not going to get hit. But we've got in here, Lockie's painted up the bracket that we welded on for the bulkhead. They're all in, P-clips are on the... And we've got our brake line done. So handbrake, we have a look here. Our brake line goes up over the top of the diff, little P-clip at the top there, comes back down over to our brake hose comes up into the floor, and we have a little short little one on this side. So it's coming together slowly but surely, and look in the part, it's come up really, really good in the black. I like it. Anti-roll bar and everything, we need to make sure we've got it all the way down and then all the way up, so we make sure we've got no issues with our lines or anything. But now we're going to go ahead, make a little dummy line with this so we don't waste any material, and then we can go ahead and show you how we make off this little dummy that has really tight radiuses, and we'll show you how we make our little fuel line. So I'll hand you back over to Lockie and we'll make this line up. Alright, that's brake lines, fuel lines, everything done. Underneath, we just need to mount them. So we've got a cool little different size P-clamp there. We're going to bang that up here, so you can still get to all the nuts and bolts necessary, but that's our lines coming out, up, one to the return, one to the supply, and back to the tank over there. So we're just going to come down on the hoist now, make sure nothing hits. We've got all our clearances where we need them and whatnot. So Lockie's just going to pump this up and let it down. So far so good on your side. Yeah, anti-roll bar misses that return beautifully. Supply goes through there. We might move that across just a touch. We haven't tightened it up yet, so beautiful. All these lines, are so much happening in here, but we're all good. Brake line, handbrake, fuel lines, control arms, shocks, everything. It's all happening, but what a work of art. Copyright Jesse. Beautiful. Lovely. I love it. It's awesome. Now we can flare those couple of bits and pieces, and I think she'll be all ready to go. But we'll get them done, and then we can do a fuel pressure check, make sure there's no leaks, and a brake, bleed the brakes, and happy days. Beautiful. Alright, Lockie's just banged a little M4 nutsert in there, so we're just putting this fuel line back on. So just down here, and we'll have to do that one up there, just the return line. Beautiful. Nice. We'll just nip him up here as well. Alright, now that fuel line's done, we will be able to bang these little P-clips that we were talking about earlier. We'll be able to bang one of them in. So, got a little bolt, we'll bang him through, make sure it's big and the small sides are right. That way. Then we'll be able to line our little nutsert up with the bottom half of the P-clip. Like so. That's pulling them together really nicely. Nice. The best thing about those little P-clamps, gives it that little space off the floor, so you know nothing's gonna rub through or anything like that. They sit really well. So P-clips in, fuel lines are all done. We'll just triple check them. Nice. And we've changed the fuel filter under the back here, so we've run through some fuel, made sure it's all good. Get all the little bits of swarf and everything that might be in the tank. We didn't find anything in the fuel filter, so that's all good. But the next step from here is we're going to do all of the 4-link checks. We're going to write down all the arm lengths and then nip up all the jam nuts. So I'm happy with the pinion angle, and I'm happy with where the wheel's sitting. So now that's that. We're not going to be able to adjust this anti-roll bar 100% until Chris gets here and we get him in the car and then neutral it, just so it's got the driver's weight in it and whatnot. But we can go ahead and get his old exhaust put back on. On the next time the car comes in, we're going to be jumping onto the exhaust and a couple other bits and pieces, possibly roll cage and everything ready for racing. But for now, we're going to be calling it so we can get it back for his holidays. And then that way you can enjoy the car with the family over the holiday period. And we'll be able to get it, when we get it back, we'll be able to jump onto all those other bits and pieces. But for now, we're going to bang some new mufflers on it and get after it. Alright, it's all together. It's finally done. Just about to start it, but we'll just go underneath and show you everything we've done. So starting at the back, we've got the fuel tank. So we've cut all the internals up from that. And obviously you would have seen we put the swirl pod in with all the return lines and repaired that little sump piece that was in there, along with new fuel system from up to the bulkhead we've placed up here. Remounted the fuel pump with some engine mount style mounts on it. New 4-link, diff, everything under here is new. So that's looking $1 million. The black really looks the part as well. We're looking forward to starting it up with the new mufflers. So I've got the new mufflers on the old system. And like I said, when the car comes back for roll cage and all the other stuff when he's ready to race it, we're gonna complete doing the rest of it. So handbrakes all adjusted, all the brakes are redone after doing the brake lines and everything. So now we're gonna come down and we're gonna start it with the new mufflers, and I cannot wait to hear it. So then we go on the test drive. So that's a wrap. She's all back together. She's on the ground, ready to hit the street. So just to recap on everything, we've put a new rear end in it. We've changed the geometry of the arms. We've done some repairs. We've all new swage work on the boot cover, along with modifying the fuel cell, all the internals of the fuel cell, and all the fuel system at the back. So it's definitely looking the part. She's sitting pretty, ready for Chris to go tear up the streets. So we're gonna quickly check out the boot. I'll quickly run through some stuff we've done in there, and then we can go along and see how it all started. So at the back we've got our parachute. In the boot, we've got the fuel cell that we modified, along with all the new fuel lines. And in here you can see all the tin work. We've brought out all the wiring. Nitrous bottles in here, batteries relocated. Did it, Butch? Alright, so we just got back from our drive. What do you reckon?
Love it, mate. Absolute fucking beast.
Nah, it's come up good.
New car.
It's come up really good.